Mother, father, what's afoot? Only Possum black as soot. Mother, father, where to tread? Far from Possum and his head. Here's a bag, now what's inside? Does he seek or does he hide? Can you spy him deep within? Little Possum, black as sin.
Police are widening their search for missing teenager Michael Browning, who disappeared on his way home from school.
Happened before, I recall. Did you find him? Waking up, is it?
Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2018 psychological horror film, Possum. Now, before I get into sharing my thoughts on this film, I want to give a shout out to Seth for requesting this review. If there is a film, a TV show, or an anime that you'd like to see me review in the future, or a topic you'd like to see me discuss, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description down below. Now, Possum is the directorial debut of Matthew Holness, who some of you might be familiar with because he is the driving force behind the cult hit Garth Marenghi's Dark Place. And if you were expecting anything remotely close to that show with Possum, you are going to be completely disappointed, because this is nothing like that show. This is nothing like Dark Place. And in some ways, it's too bad, because I really feel that a dark, morbid comedy that has its tongue planted firmly in its left cheek is honestly where Holness shines. He's not nearly as effective and as dynamic of a writer or a filmmaker when he is doing more traditional horror. And this film, despite the fact that there are some genuinely creepy moments, and there's some good things like Sean Davis in terms of his performance as Philip and some other elements that work, you can tell that Holness is trying a little too hard to play against type and to deliver a film that is more serious and doesn't have any levity whatsoever. It's almost like he deliberately chose this project to show that I'm not just a comedy guy. I'm a serious filmmaker. And whenever that happens, it usually is something that is kind of a train wreck. And I felt that there were some moments here, specifically with the screenplay, where it was a train wreck. It was something that was unfortunate to witness and to have to sit through. That being said, I felt his direction for a first time director was pretty good, especially when it comes to the more nightmarish sequences of the puppet with the human head and the spider legs crawling around, or the other sequences that are trying to showcase a glimpse inside Philip's unstable mind. But there are other scenes that just look kind of flat and really bland. Not much energy, not much life to them. But I do feel he showed that he definitely had some talent, and I would be curious to see something else from him in the future, because of the fact that there were a lot of ambitious shots here that I felt that he pulled off brilliantly. I think the direction is actually one of the best things about the film when it comes to the visual style. Uh, where the film lacks the most is with the screenplay. I felt the script was weak. I thought it was a weak, threadbare, incredibly thin script. It's blatantly obvious that this was based on a short story, and that this film was stretched out to its near breaking point from a very short horror tale, because that's what happened with this film. It's based on a short story written by Matthew Holness himself, and he stretched things out to fit a feature-length film, and there wasn't enough meat on the bone. There wasn't enough there. And that's why everything is so vague. And that's why he tries to defend it by saying it's supposed to be that way. I wanted to make you think. I wanted to have the film linger with you afterwards. And it's like, okay, yeah, I understand. But in order for that to actually happen, in order for the film to actually have an impact, you have to provide the audience with a reason to think about it afterwards. And without a concrete, clear story, without a protagonist that you actually care about, there's no reason for you to have that moment after the film is over where you ponder or you think about the film in a deeper manner. So it's one of those movies where I get what it was trying to do. It's clearly trying to talk about the effects of psychological trauma and abuse, and how that can turn into a very real horror, and a horror that it is difficult for people to separate from nightmare and reality. But it doesn't really work that well in the end, because everything is just so thin. The motivations of the plot and how everything carries out is very thin. The characterizations, not really as in depth as you think. I think that these characters really needed more development to flesh them out a little bit. Making them vague works for a 20-30 minute long short. It doesn't work for a feature film having everything so fucking vague that you can't really understand, let alone tell what's going on half the time, let alone give a shit what's happening on the screen. It's a waste of a lot of potential. It's a waste of Sean Davis's mesmerizing and genuinely great performance as Philip. I thought he portrayed a troubled and tortured soul perfectly. I thought he did an amazing job with that. I wish the character was written better. I wish the character was somewhat sympathetic. He's not sympathetic until the very end, and at that point it's too late. I don't know why they couldn't have moments where, instead of making it seem like he might be the one that's killing kids in the neighborhood, show him as someone who is actually still being abused somewhat. Show him as somebody who's still dealing with a lot of trauma. And I think that's what it was trying to do, is trying to show that with his uncle character, who, by the way, I didn't even know it was his uncle until the twist at the end, because the script did such a lame job making you think that those two were related in any way. I thought that he was just his landlord. That was it. I didn't even think that they were family. So yeah, he keeps seeing these nightmares and these delusions of this creepy looking puppet with a human head, which looks like it actually might be his head, but white. I think they might have used Sean Davis's head model for that puppet, and if they did, it makes perfect sense, since what it is a figment of his imagination. The film tries to drag things out to play this: is it real? Is it not? Did the puppet actually come to life, and is it the puppet killing people, or blah 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 blah? But it becomes very obvious early on that it's just in his head. It's just some kind of extension of his fractured psyche. Uh, and then you're just waiting for the film to catch up. And it takes way too long to do that. And you're just like, what are we doing here? Why are we dragging things out so long? Oh, we're dragging things out so long because we don't have enough for a feature film. Because it's a short story. And it should have just been a short film. Unless you're going to have some other writer come in and enhance things some more and provide a little bit more juice or character depth or dialogue or subplots or some other things to make things more engaging. And it's a shame. There are some really great nightmarish, creepy as hell visuals in this. The various different sequences of the spider-like puppet, the shots of just pure nightmare fuel. And there's other stuff too that's really well shot. Like there's a scene where Philip is getting rained on by this black substance, and the way that that sequence is shot is gorgeous. And there are other scenes that are shot in ways that are very unsettling and unnerving, and it all works quite well. But the screenplay sucks because there's not enough there. There's not enough here for a feature film, and the film collapses as a result because it's just stretched out too thin to the point where it just snaps. The cast is very minimal, very limited in terms of how many people there are. You only have Sean Harris and Alun Armstrong. That's really the two main characters. The most people have the screen time. There are other actors and actresses here, but they don't nearly have as much to do and don't really have that much time on the screen. And even though it's only 85 minutes, it feels like it's longer than that because the pacing suffers so badly due to the thin script. But it's got some other elements that I thought were noteworthy. I thought the music was really eerie and spooky and added a lot to the film by the Radiophonic Workshop. Although there were some times where it was just a little too much. And what I mean by that, there were some bits of music that were like way too high pitched, and I know what they were trying to go for, but it got to the point where it was just obnoxious and really didn't help the atmosphere or the mood or what the scene was trying to go for. Um, but yeah, there are other elements. Kip Frazier did a good job with the cinematography. I felt that it was well edited by Tommy Bolding. I mean, it clearly was a low budget production, and I felt for a very small amount of money, it managed to really turn in and churn out some genuinely memorable visuals. But the visuals are so fleeting in terms of their impact because of the story and the characters. Uh, I will give Matthew Holness credit for the twist at the end. I didn't see it coming in terms of how everything uh, unfolded. Spoilers here if you haven't seen the film. Uh, in the end of the movie, you find out that his uncle is the one that has been abusing him. He's the reason for his trauma. And then on top of that, his uncle is the one that's responsible for the disappearance of these kids. And at the end of the film, Philip finally has enough, stands up for himself, and kills his uncle, and then saves the kid, and in a lot of ways saves himself because he fights the very genesis of this demon that has continually been haunting him throughout the entire film. Because you find out through a very series of harrowing sequences that the puppet with the spider legs is really just a extension of his uncle, because his uncle's saying things like, "Oh, Mr. Longfingers is here, and I'm gonna stick my long fingers. You don't like my long fingers, do you?" And the long fingers were used to assault him when he was young, and he's still being assaulted by his uncle. So the long fingers are just really what ultimately is this puppet that he's created in his head, that's just always following him around and is always haunting his dreams, and making his life a constant nightmare, is because of these long fingers that belong to his uncle. And even that's a little bit of a letdown, because the uncle doesn't get it in a very satisfying way. Like, all this build up, oh, here it's revealed that he's the one that's been kidnapping and potentially raping and murdering these kids. And he raped and molested and sexually assaulted and psychologically tortured Philip for most of his life. And Philip just fights back in just an incredibly lame, unremarkable fashion and just snaps his neck. I don't know why you couldn't have had a moment where, oh, he punches him, he kicks him, throws his ass onto an exposed piece of wood and he gets impaled or something. Something other than just, oh, just they struggle, they fight a little bit, and then he snaps his neck on the edge of a exposed board, because there's like a hole in the floor, and he just grabs him and they get in this little scuffle, and then he just grabs his head and just pushes it back and then snaps his neck over the hole in the floor. It's just like but it's fitting for a script and a film that's full of holes and has so many that it ultimately falls through the hole and doesn't rise to its full potential. So I don't really know what else to say about Possum. There's really not much to this film when it comes to the plot. Like I said, it's very threadbare, very thin. Just a series of loosely interconnected sequences with creepy visuals, and this whole, is Philip the killer? Is he not? A lot of these scenes with him carrying a bag, and so the film's trying to be like, oh, does the bag have the kid in it? Oh, and he has a lot of moments where he tries to get rid of the bag, and of course the bag represents a lot of things. It represents emotional baggage, it represents things that he can't actually get rid of, just like the possum itself, which, it's not a giant possum, by the way. I think the possum is intended to be this puppet with spider legs. I think there's an explanation for it that I don't quite get. I think it's something that has to do with the fact that I'm an American, and maybe there's a different meaning for possum in the UK, but there's some loss in translation with that too. But yeah, it's just one of those movies where I'm glad I saw it for the puppet and for some really creepy shots and visuals, but it ultimately has next to no impact for me, because of the fact that I didn't give a shit about the characters, and the story was just so thin. Uh, and its attempts at being deep were very uh, uh, run of the mill to me. I mean, I'm sorry, Matthew Holness. Like, what did you think? Were you really think you were making something groundbreaking here? Or making some groundbreaking bit of psychological horror, dealing with the waking nightmares that a lot of people who were dealing with trauma deal with? Like, were you really thinking that people were gonna be fooled and think that this really is a puppet that's coming to life and killing people, or that there really is some kind of supernatural thing going on here. Uh, if you felt that, then you really didn't you didn't really have the best uh, idea of who your audience is. Your audience is not a bunch of simpletons, not a bunch of morons who haven't seen that many films and haven't read that many stories dealing with this kind of attempt to uh, pull the wool over people's eyes. So, eh, it's one of those movies where it is really all style and not much substance, despite the attempts by the director and who also is the writer to say otherwise. But the style is admittedly quite good, and that's why I would say the film is at least a below average movie. It's not terrible. It's not one of the worst things I've ever seen. And it's something that I would recommend people checking out if they're curious because of its strong visuals. But even those visuals to me aren't enough to make the film a good movie, let alone something that I really have any desire to watch again. Anyway, thank you for watching my review of Possum, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.